on the map that there is one main road going from the east to the west towards the Russian border. That's the road that goes through, I hope you can read it from wherever you're sitting, Sivas, Erzincan, Erzurum, and goes up to the border. That is one of the oldest roads in the history of man. It goes back to the Roman Empire and well before. And it was the main road in the Roman Empire, and it's the main road, well, it's pretty much the main road today. It truly was in World War I. Secondly, there is another main road, and that's the main road that goes down towards the south, as you can see, up through Diyarbakir, Bitlis, and over to Van, and then to the Iranian border. Now, when I say the main road, I don't want to give you an idea that we're talking about superhighways and there also were a whole bunch of 4-lane roads that go along. We're talking about going through mountains here. We're talking about having 2 good roads, and we're talking about having a whole bunch of dirt paths. I mean, if the Ottoman army is going to be supplied, if they are going to move their men through these territories, they have to control these roads. There are other roads that go on the Black Sea, but unfortunately those are smaller, they're poorer, as you can see on the north there, upper Trabzon. You can't even see the roads because they're too small really to put on the map. And also the Russians have a navy up there, and they tend to do things like bombard the roads, making them very inefficient to move troops and supplies. Keeping these roads open then was crucial to the Ottoman Empire, not only for war, but for escape. Because if the Ottomans began to lose to the Russians, they had to be able to fall back, and they had to be able to regroup. Secondly, there's the matter of communication. Not quite, but pretty close to the way the roads go, are the series of telegraph lines. World War I was the first war in this part of the world, at least, that was fought with relatively modern methods of communication. In order for people to be able to command the Ottoman army and the Russian army, in order to move troops from one place to another, in order for one group of people to know what was happening on one front so they could adjust their own front, in order to say when troops had to be moved and supplies brought in, they had to do this by telegraph. Telegraph was the lifeblood of an army and was absolutely essential. The 2 main telegraph lines are the darker lines that you see there that go towards both fronts. If these telegraph lines were cut, there was disaster for the Ottoman army. At one time, when the telegraph lines were cut, for example, down in the city of Van, the far south down there, where you see between the 2 lakes there, at one time, in order to get communications with Istanbul, in order to get communications with the headquarters, they had to go down through Baghdad. Now, Baghdad to Istanbul is not the chosen way for a telegraph to go. Why did they have to do this? They had to do that because of Armenian guerrilla actions that cut the wires. Specifically, if you look at these areas, you'll notice in these major areas where the boxes are, the green boxes, the wires were cut again and again and again and again because there were major revolts in which the whole things were torn up and took months to replace. But all over the area in the east, wires were repeatedly cut. Now, they never were completely cut because soldiers had to keep on going out, patrolling the lines, thousands of soldiers, to make sure that something stayed open. But they always were cut a third, a fourth, sometimes up to a half of the communications. And that meant that the Ottoman ability to communicate was degraded tremendously, as I say, to the point where they had to go from the southeastern part of Turkey to the capital, all the way, by the way, Baghdad. Major Armenian attacks on the wires. And when this took place, it was in many ways a very strange action for revolutionaries. Not at all a strange action for guerrillas fighting in the defense of the Russian Empire. Or I should say guerrillas fighting to attack the Ottoman Empire. In order to understand that, I want to talk about 3 places in some detail. 3 areas I've chosen are Sivas, Cilicia, and Van. The Sivas region, the Van region, and the Cilician region around the city of Adana today. In these regions, in these 3 areas, we can see exactly what the Armenian guerrillas did to the Ottoman ability to fight war, and even more importantly, what they did to the civilian populations in these regions. In Sivas, in this area here, you had Armenian revolt that was exceedingly strange. It was exceedingly strange because Sivas was separated, a great distance separated from the Russian army. When the Armenians revolted, as we'll see in Van, they did so very close to the Russian army and in the hopes that the Russians would come in and save them. Sivas had the entire Ottoman Third Army between it and the Russian Empire. Sivas was not important then because of any revolution. In fact, if we look at the area of Sivas, which is the areas of Sivas and Shebin-Kara-Hisar, we notice that there are very few Armenians there. If you were having a real revolution, people were fed up with the government, were going to do something about it, you would expect that it would take place in an area where there were lots of your people. This is the opposite of the case. Sivas is a place where there are really very few Armenians. In the Sivas province altogether, a little more than 10% of the population is Armenian, and almost all the rest are Muslim. Why would you revolt there? Why would you revolt in a place where there are very few of your people? Why would you revolt in a place where you are very far from having a chance to be successfully helped by the Russians? The only reason you would do it is because you were on the supply line to the front. You would do it because you were expecting that you would stop the Ottomans from delivering troops, from delivering supplies, and thus hinder the Ottoman war effort. The only sense that it makes to have a revolt, to attack the roads, is to aid the Russian army. And indeed, in Sivas, 15,000 Armenian guerrillas formed into partisan units, attacked the people in the area, attacked the supply lines, attacked the convoys of troops, and especially attacked the telegraph lines. The city of Shebin-Kara-Hisar, which you see right there on the map, it was taken and held against Ottoman troops by the Armenians. That's a Google map, and it's not perfect, but it gives you a feeling of what the land looks like. If you're going to revolt at a place, if you're going to have guerrilla warfare against an army, you want to pick a place like this. You can see the line of Sivas and Shebin-Kara-Hisar. You can't tell too well where the road is. I could go up and show it to you, but you can't tell too where the road is, and that's because the road is down, sunk down, between hills on all sides. Guerrillas can attack the roads and attack the telegraph lines from up in the hills, go down, attack a supply column, and get away before any of the soldiers can get to them, which is, of course, exactly what they did, until the Ottomans put literally thousands of soldiers in to try to make them stop. Thus, attacking in Sivas makes very good sense for guerrillas who were fighting in aid of the Russians. It doesn't make any other sense. It's important to note, I think, that the revolts I'm talking about in Sivas and many of the other revolts in Urfa, Zeytun, various places, were eventually put down by the Ottomans. The Ottomans did manage to stop them, but they only managed to stop them through the use of thousands of troops that should have been at the front fighting against the Russians. Cilicia, the area down in the sort of the south central of Turkey where the Mediterranean comes in a sort of an angle. Cilicia was a place where the British moved up. It was a place where the Armenians tried as hard as they could to help the British invade and conquer the Ottoman Empire. As the war began, Armenian groups went to London and went to British representatives in places like Bulgaria and even in the United States, offering their services. They said they had one difficulty, and that was, unlike the Armenians in Van and in Sivas that were close to Russia and could get lots of guns from there, smuggled in, they were very far away. And they had a very difficult time getting enough guns. They said what they needed was, they needed supplies and guns, and they needed the British to land in that area. Once they did, tens of thousands of Armenians, and who knows if they were exaggerating, but it's probably true. Tens of thousands of Armenians would rise up with their guns, join with the British, and allow the British to go in. This would have been the smartest move the British could have made to defeat the Ottoman Empire, because as you can see, the railroad lines that go through that area, the railroad lines that go through are the only way to get troops and supplies down both to Syria and Palestine, where they're fighting the British, and to Iraq, where they're fighting the British. If the British had moved into there, instead of going stupidly to Gallipoli, if they had moved into that territory, they could have cut the railroad line so that the Ottomans could not have supplied their troops and at least cut the Ottoman Empire in half. With the help of the Armenians, they could have done it. The British decided instead that they would make a quick run at Gallipoli. They would move in really quickly. They would take Istanbul and drive the Ottomans out of the war, and they greatly underestimated the Turks. But this system almost surely would have won.